Emily. Her name on his lips broke the spell that had frozen her in place. I found you. The simple statement hung in the autumn air between them, loaded with 6 months of unspoken history. Emily clutched the porch railing of Huron Haven bed and breakfast for support, one hand instinctively moving to protect her rounded belly, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain he must hear it. How? She managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Does it matter? Dominic's piercing blue eyes never left her face, though she saw them flicker briefly to her pregnancy. I've had people searching since the day you disappeared. Private investigators in 6 states. Data analysts tracking digital footprints. I nearly fired the entire security team when they couldn't locate you. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You were very thorough. I didn't want to be found, Emily said, finding her voice. I made that clear in my resignation. Family obligations require my immediate departure. Dominic quoted her letter verbatim. Was that what you call this? His gesture encompassed her pregnancy. A family obligation? The hurt beneath his controlled tone caught her off guard. This wasn't the reaction she'd anticipated from Chicago's most ruthless CEO. Anger, perhaps, or cool calculation of how to handle an unexpected complication. Not this wounded vulnerability from a man who prided himself on emotional control. Have you ever faced that moment when the walls you've built to protect your heart suddenly come face to face with the very person you were hiding from? That impossible choice between safeguarding your future and risking everything for a love you never thought could be real? Today's story explores what happens when a woman makes the bravest choice of all, choosing herself and her child, only to discover that sometimes, the people we run from are also running toward a truth they've only just discovered themselves. 5 years earlier, Emily Harper had stepped into the gleaming headquarters of Thornton Enterprises with nothing but determination and a freshly printed resume. At 29, she'd already built a solid reputation in executive support roles, but landing an interview with Chicago's fastest-growing tech company had felt like touching the edge of something extraordinary. The 72nd floor executive suite had intimidated her at first. All glass and steel and breathtaking views of Lake Michigan stretching to the horizon. But it was the man behind the massive desk who truly commanded attention. Dominic Thornton had been younger than she expected for someone who'd built a billion-dollar empire from scratch. At 36, his dark hair showed no signs of silver. His tall frame carried no hint of the sedentary executive lifestyle. But it was his eyes that had struck her most sharp, assessing, the deep blue of a winter lake, missing nothing as they scanned her resume. Your references are impressive, he'd said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone unaccustomed to being questioned. But they don't tell me why you want this particular position. Emily had taken a breath, knowing this moment would define her future. Because I don't just want a job, Mr. Thornton. I want to be part of something transformative. Your company is redefining how technology serves human needs, not just consumer wants. I'd like to contribute to that vision, even in a supporting role. Something had flickered in those penetrating eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. Most candidates talk about the salary or the prestige, he'd observed. Not the vision. I'm not most candidates, Emily had replied simply. A slight smile had touched his lips then, the first crack in his formidable facade. No, Ms. Harper, I don't believe you are. She'd started the following Monday. The early months had established their professional rhythm. Emily anticipating needs before they arose, Dominic gradually entrusting her with increasing responsibility. She learned his preferences without being told. Black coffee in the morning, green tea after 3. Conference calls scheduled before lunch when his focus was sharpest. The subtle signs that indicated when visitors should be ushered out before they overstayed their welcome. In turn, he came to rely on her judgment, her calm efficiency during crises, her diplomatic handling of difficult clients and colleagues. You make me better at my job, he told her once, after she'd salvaged a nearly disastrous meeting with Japanese investors. The simple acknowledgement had warmed her more than it should have. By the end of her first year, Emily had become indispensable. By the end of her second, she'd begun to notice things about Dominic Thornton that went beyond professional observation. The way sunlight caught the angles of his face when he stood by the window deep in thought. how his rare, genuine laugh transformed his usually serious expression, the gentleness with which he spoke to the elderly custodian who cleaned the executive floor after hours. By her third year, Emily had realized with quiet dismay that she was falling in love with her boss. And by her fourth, she'd become expert at hiding it. "You're working too hard," Margot from accounting had told her over rare after-work drinks. 5 years of 60-hour weeks for a man who probably doesn't even know your middle name. Emily had smiled, not bothering to correct her. Dominic did know her middle name, Catherine, after her grandmother. Just as she knew he visited his mother's grave on the first Sunday of every month, always alone. Just as she knew he secretly added cream to his coffee after particularly difficult board meetings. A small comfort he allowed himself when no one was watching. No one except Emily, who saw everything about Dominic Thornton that he thought he kept hidden. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was whether he saw her as anything more than the perfect executive assistant. Until the night of the Thornton Foundation Gala. The annual charity event was the crown jewel of Chicago's social calendar, raising millions for children's education initiatives. Emily had orchestrated every detail, from the champagne selection to the seating arrangements that strategically placed potential investors near Dominic throughout the evening. "You've outdone yourself," Dominic murmured as they stood at the entrance of the grand ballroom at the historic Blackstone Hotel. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over tables adorned with white orchids and silver accents, the Chicago skyline glittering beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. Emily, for once not in her usual professional attire but in a midnight blue gown that skimmed her curves, felt a flush rise to her cheeks at his approval. "Just doing my job." "No," Dominic said, his blue eyes holding hers with unusual intensity. "This isn't just your job. This is exceptional. You're exceptional, Emily." The evening progressed in a blur of champagne toasts, successful networking, and a record-breaking auction. Emily circulated efficiently, ensuring everything ran smoothly while Dominic charmed potential donors and business associates. But something had shifted between them. A heightened awareness, a gravitational pull that had them repeatedly finding each other across the crowded room. When the orchestra began playing after dinner, Dominic appeared at her side. "Dance with me," he said, not quite a question but not quite a command either. On the dance floor, his hand at the small of her back felt like a brand through the silky fabric of her gown. "You never join the dancing at these events," she observed, trying to maintain her professional composure despite their proximity. "I never had a reason to," he replied simply, his usual sharp gaze softened by something she couldn't quite name. One dance became two, then three. Champagne flowed. The night stretched into the early morning hours as the crowd thinned. When only a handful of guests remained, Dominic leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "Come up to the penthouse suite with me. There's a vintage Bordeaux I've been saving for a special occasion." Emily knew she should decline. 5 years of carefully maintained boundaries whispered caution. But the warmth in his eyes, the slight vulnerability in his invitation, so different from his usual commanding presence, made her nod. The penthouse suite, with its panoramic views of Chicago's glittering skyline and Lake Michigan beyond, felt intimate despite its grandeur. They stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, wine glasses in hand, the city spread before them like a carpet of stars. "Do you know how rare you are, Emily?" Dominic asked quietly, setting down his barely touched wine. "In my world, everyone wants something. Everyone has an angle. But not you. You're real." "I want things too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me," he urged, stepping closer. "What does Emily Harper want?" The truth spilled out before she could stop it. "You. I've wanted you for so long." The confession hung between them for one breathless moment before Dominic closed the distance, his lips finding hers with a hunger that suggested he'd been holding back for just as long. The kiss deepened, years of unspoken longing transforming into a passion neither could contain. That night changed everything. In the luxurious king-sized bed, with the city lights casting a soft glow through the windows, Dominic showed a tenderness that contradicted his ruthless business reputation. His hands, usually occupied with signing contracts worth millions, traced her curves with reverent care. His voice, accustomed to issuing commands in boardrooms, whispered her name like a prayer. For those precious hours, the walls he'd built around himself crumbled, revealing the man beneath the power. Passionate, attentive, almost vulnerable in his desire for her. And Emily, who had loved him silently for years, gave herself completely to the connection she'd thought would never be possible. Morning brought reality crashing back. Emily woke to find Dominic already dressed in a fresh suit, taking a business call by the window, his voice once again the clipped, authoritative tone of the CEO. When he noticed she was awake, he ended the call and approached the bed, his expression unreadable. "I have to fly to New York for an emergency board meeting," he said, checking his watch. "The jet's waiting. We'll talk when I get back tomorrow." Before she could respond, he leaned down and kissed her. Briefly, but with an intensity that suggested the night hadn't been just a momentary lapse in judgment. Then he was gone, leaving Emily alone with rumpled sheets and uncertainty. If you've ever had to choose between protecting your heart and taking a chance on love, hit that like button and join our community of strong women who understand life's complicated choices. The next 6 weeks passed in a confusing blur. Dominic returned from New York only to immediately depart for Tokyo, then London, then Dubai, a whirlwind of international deals that kept him away from Chicago for all but a few scattered days. During those brief windows, their professional relationship remained outwardly unchanged, but private moments in his office or the back of his town car were filled with passionate encounters that left Emily increasingly convinced that what they shared was more than physical attraction. Yet they never spoke about what was happening between them, never defined the relationship or discussed a future. The words "I love you" remained unspoken, though Emily felt them building inside her with each passing day. Then came the morning sickness. At first, Emily attributed the nausea to stress, to the long hours and emotional complexity of her situation with Dominic. But when her typically clockwork regular cycle failed to appear for the second month, she could no longer deny the possibility. The pregnancy test, taken in the pristine bathroom of her modest Lincoln Park apartment, confirmed what her body had been trying to tell her. 2 pink lines, unmistakable and life-altering. Emily sat on the edge of her bathtub, the plastic test still in her trembling hand, and tried to imagine telling Dominic. The timing couldn't be worse. Thornton Enterprises was in the middle of its largest acquisition to date, absorbing a rival tech company in a move that had the business world buzzing and Dominic working around the clock. His focus was absolute, his stress levels palpable. And beyond the immediate circumstances, there was the fundamental question of what she meant to him. Was she a convenient companion, a trusted assistant who had become a satisfying physical relationship? Or was there something deeper that he hadn't yet expressed? The memory of a conversation from years ago surfaced with painful clarity. They had been working late, reviewing quarterly reports, when news broke of a competitor's divorce. "That's why I'll never marry," Dominic had said dismissively, barely looking up from the spreadsheets. "Children, family, they're distractions I can't afford. My company is my legacy." At the time, Emily had filed the comment away as one of many insights into her enigmatic boss. Now, those casual words took on devastating significance. For 3 days, she wrestled with her decision, cycling through scenarios, imagining Dominic's reaction. Would he see the baby as an unwelcome complication in his high-powered life? Would he accept it? Or would he simply arrange a discreet solution to the problem, complete with an NDA and a generous settlement? None of these possibilities aligned with what Emily needed for herself and her child. She wanted a baby born from love, not obligation. She wanted a partner who chose her, not circumstances that forced his hand. On the 4th day, Emily made her decision. With shaking hands, she typed her resignation letter, citing family obligations that required her immediate departure. She emptied her modest savings account, erased her digital footprint as thoroughly as possible, and booked a one-way ticket to northern Michigan. To Oscoda, the small lakeside town where her mother's sister, Aunt Clara, ran a charming bed and breakfast on the shores of Lake Huron. The one place Emily had always felt at peace during childhood summers. The one place, she hoped, where she could build a new life for herself and her child, far from the complications of Chicago and the man who held her heart but might never truly be hers. The morning of her departure, Emily placed her resignation letter and company key card on Dominic's desk before dawn. Knowing he wouldn't arrive for hours, she allowed herself one moment of weakness, touching the sleek surface of his desk, remembering the night he'd swept the papers aside and laid her across it. His eyes dark with desire as he whispered how long he'd wanted to do exactly that. "Goodbye, Dominic," she whispered to the empty office, one hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "I'm sorry." Then she walked out of Thornton Enterprises for the last time, tears blurring her vision as the elevator descended 72 floors to the lobby, carrying her away from the life she'd known and the man she couldn't stop loving. Oscoda, Michigan welcomed Emily with open arms and no questions. Aunt Clara, a vibrant widow in her 60s with silver-streaked auburn hair and the same kind hazel eyes as Emily's mother, simply hugged her niece tightly when she appeared on the doorstep of Huron Haven bed and breakfast, suitcase in hand. "You're staying as long as you need?" Clara declared, leading Emily to the cozy blue bedroom overlooking the lake, the same room she'd occupied during childhood summers. No arguments. The first night, over homemade chicken soup in Clara's warm kitchen, Emily shared her situation. The pregnancy, her feelings for Dominic, her fear of becoming an obligation to a man whose life plan had never included family. Clara listened without judgment, her weathered hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "You've always had good instincts, Emmy," she said finally, using the childhood nickname that no one else ever used. "If you felt you needed to leave, I trust that. But remember, running from pain often just means delaying it." "I'm not running from pain," Emily insisted. "I'm protecting my baby from becoming a corporate inconvenience." Clara's gaze was gentle but knowing. "And have you considered that you might be wrong about how he would react? That you might be protecting yourself from a rejection you're only assuming would come?" Emily had no answer for that. Days turned into weeks, and Emily found her place in the rhythm of Huron Haven. She helped prepare breakfast for guests, tended the gardens that surrounded the Victorian-era home, welcomed visitors, and gradually became an essential part of the inn's daily operations. Her marketing background proved valuable as she refreshed the B&B's website and social media presence, attracting a new generation of guests to the charming lakeside retreat. As her body changed, growing round with the new life inside her, Emily found unexpected peace in Oscoda's gentle pace. Morning walks along the shore of Lake Huron, community events at the small town square, friendly neighbors who accepted her story of being a recently divorced marketing executive seeking a fresh start, all created a cocoon of normalcy that helped heal the Chicago-shaped hole in her heart. Have you ever had to completely reinvent yourself? Share your story of resilience in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what another sister needs to hear today. At her 20-week ultrasound in the modest regional medical center, Emily learned she was having a boy. Alone in the examination room, watching the grainy image of her son on the monitor, she allowed herself to imagine Dominic beside her, his usually stern face transformed by wonder. The fantasy was so vivid it left her gasping with grief for what might have been. "I'll name you Jack," she whispered to her unborn son that night, watching the sunset paint Lake Huron in shades of gold and pink from her bedroom window. "After my father. He was the kindest man I've ever known. I hope you inherit that kindness." She didn't add what she was thinking, that she also hoped he would inherit Dominic's determination, his brilliant mind, his rare but transformative smile, that despite everything, she wanted her son to carry the best parts of his father with him through life. Summer faded into a glorious Michigan autumn. The maple trees surrounding Huron Haven blazed with color, and the lake took on the deep blue hue that had given it its name. Emily, now visibly pregnant at 6 months, had found a comfortable routine helping Clara with the reduced number of off-season guests and preparing the inn for the coming winter. On a particularly beautiful October afternoon, Emily was arranging chrysanthemums on the wide front porch when a sleek black Range Rover pulled into the gravel driveway. The vehicle was jarringly out of place among the modest cars and pickup trucks of Oscoda. A piece of urban sophistication dropped into the rural landscape. And then Dominic had stepped out, looking both perfectly put together and somehow undone. his blue eyes finding her instantly across the distance. Now, standing in the lakeside gazebo where she'd led him for privacy, Emily watched as Dominic processed the reality of her pregnancy. His tall frame was silhouetted against the backdrop of Lake Huron's vast blue expanse, tension evident in every line of his body. 6 months, he repeated her words. A son. Something flickered across his face, a complex emotion she couldn't quite identify. Then, more directly, why did you leave without telling me? Did you think so little of me that you assumed I wouldn't want to know about my own child? I thought I was sparing us both, she said, her hands resting protectively on her belly. You made it clear years ago that children weren't part of your plan, that your company was your legacy. I didn't want you to feel trapped or obligated. So instead, you disappeared. Dominic's voice hardened. No discussion. No chance for me to process the news or have any say in my own child's life. You just vanished. I was scared, Emily admitted, the words catching in her throat. Scared you'd see our baby as a problem to solve. Scared you'd accept it out of duty rather than love. Scared of raising a child in the shadow of your empire, always second to Thornton Enterprises. Dominic was silent for a long moment, his gaze shifting to the lake where golden afternoon light danced across the water. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its edge, replaced by something raw and unfamiliar. Do you have any idea what it did to me when you left? The question was quiet, almost conversational, but Emily could hear the pain beneath it. I walked into my office that morning and found your letter. 2 paragraphs ending 5 years of whatever we were. No explanation. No forwarding address. No response to my calls or texts. He turned to face her fully, and Emily was shocked to see his composed facade cracking, revealing the turmoil beneath. I thought something had happened to you at first, that you were in trouble or being coerced. I had security check your apartment. It was empty, like you'd never existed. His voice cracked slightly. Do you know what that feels like? To have someone who's been part of your daily life for 5 years simply disappear. Emily hadn't allowed herself to imagine his reaction, had convinced herself he would simply replace her, professionally and personally, and continue building his empire without missing a step. I'm sorry for how I left, she said softly, but not for why. I needed to protect myself and my baby from becoming an obligation to you. An obligation. Dominic repeated the word like it tasted bitter. Is that all you thought you were to me? An obligation. Before Emily could respond, he crossed the gazebo in 2 long strides and knelt before her. His eyes level with hers, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his irises, could smell the familiar sandalwood scent of his cologne. I've spent 6 months searching for you, he said, his voice low and intense. 6 months of emptiness and worry and regret. 6 months realizing that without you, none of it, the company, the deals, the power, means anything. Emily's breath caught. Dominic, let me finish. His hands hovered near hers but didn't touch, as if he feared she might disappear again if he reached for her. I know I never said the words. I know I kept us in this undefined space, neither fully personal nor professional. That was my failure, not yours. He took a deep breath, and Emily watched in astonishment as Dominic Thornton, the man Forbes had once called the Ice King of Chicago tech, struggled visibly with emotion. The truth is, I've been in love with you for years, he confessed, the words rushing out as if he'd held them back too long. Probably since that first year when you stood your ground about the Miller contract and told me I was making a mistake. No one talks to me that way. No one except you. Emily felt tears welling in her eyes, her carefully constructed defenses crumbling at his unexpected vulnerability. I didn't know how to say it, Dominic continued. How to be the man you deserved. So I kept you close without fully claiming you, telling myself it was better that way. Safer. His laugh was hollow. And then you were gone. And I realized I'd lost everything that mattered because I was too afraid to tell you the truth. What truth? Emily whispered, needing to hear the words directly. That I love you. Dominic's voice broke on the declaration. That I want a life with you. That finding out about our child doesn't change that. It only makes it more clear how much I've been denying myself by keeping you at arm's length." A tear slipped down Emily's cheek. "You said children were distractions you couldn't afford. That your company was your legacy. I was wrong." Dominic reached up to gently brush away her tear, the first contact between them in 6 months sending electricity through her skin. "So wrong. About what matters. About what I want. About everything." He glanced down at her rounded belly, then back to her face, his expression softening. "May I?" he asked, his hand hovering uncertainly. Emily nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Dominic placed his palm gently against the curve of her stomach, and as if on cue, the baby kicked, a strong, decisive movement against his father's hand. Dominic's eyes widened, wonder replacing the tension that had lined his face since his arrival. "He's strong," he murmured. "Like his father," Emily said softly. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the months of separation seemed to collapse. All the hurt and fear and longing crystallized into a single point of connection. His hand on her belly, their child moving beneath, the truth finally spoken between them. "I'm not asking you to come back with me today," Dominic said, his voice gentle but determined. "I know I have to earn your trust again, prove that I mean what I'm saying. But please, Emily, give me a chance to be part of this, to be the man you both deserve." The sincerity in his eyes was unmistakable. This wasn't the calculating CEO or the passionate but guarded lover she'd known in Chicago. This was Dominic stripped of his armor, vulnerable and honest in a way she'd only glimpsed in their most intimate moments. "I need time," she said finally. "This is a lot to process." Dominic nodded, withdrawing his hand reluctantly. "I've taken a room at the Lakeside Inn in town. I'll be here as long as it takes." He stood, straightening his suit in a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache. "When you're ready to talk more, about us, about the baby, about the future, I'll be waiting." As he turned to leave, Emily called after him. "How did you find me? Really?" Dominic paused at the gazebo entrance, a hint of his old confidence returning in the slight curve of his lips. "Your aunt's blueberry pancakes." "What?" "You mentioned them once. Said they were the best in Michigan and worth the drive to a town called Oscoda." His expression softened. "I remembered everything you ever told me, Emily. Every detail. I just wish I'd shown you how much those details mattered before it was almost too late." That evening, Emily sat with Aunt Clara on the back porch of Huron Haven, watching darkness settle over the lake. The first stars were appearing in the deepening blue sky, and a crescent moon cast a silver path across the water. "He seems sincere," Clara observed, sipping her chamomile tea. "And completely in love with you." Emily sighed, her hands cradling her belly where Jack had been unusually active since Dominic's visit. "He's always been persuasive. It's how he built his empire." "There's a difference between persuasion and truth," Clara replied. "I've seen enough of both in my 67 years to recognize the difference." She reached over to pat Emily's hand. "The question is, what do you want, Emmy?" "I want what's best for my son." "And what about what's best for you?" Clara's gaze was knowing. "You've been hiding here for months, building a life that's peaceful but incomplete. I see how you look out at the lake sometimes, lost in thoughts of what you left behind." Emily couldn't deny it. Despite the tranquility she'd found in Oscoda, despite the community that had embraced her, there had been moments, many moments, when she'd ached for what she'd left in Chicago, for who she'd left. "I'm afraid," she admitted, "afraid of believing him, of going back, of being hurt again." "Love always involves risk," Clara said simply. "The question is whether he's worth that risk." Emily thought of Dominic as he'd been that afternoon, kneeling before her, vulnerability raw in his eyes, his hand gentle on her belly as he felt his son move for the first time. So different from the commanding CEO she'd known in Chicago, yet unmistakably the same man who had captured her heart years ago. "I don't know," she whispered, but even as she said it, Emily realized she did know. Had perhaps always known, from the moment she saw him standing in the driveway of Huron Haven, looking both out of place and utterly determined. The next morning, after a restless night filled with dreams of Chicago skyscrapers and Lake Michigan sunsets, Emily walked into town. The small lakeside inn where Dominic was staying sat at the edge of Oscoda's Main Street, its white clapboard exterior and blue shutters quintessentially Michigan. She found him on the inn's back deck, laptop open on the table before him, phone pressed to his ear as he gazed out at Lake Huron. Even here, hundreds of miles from his corporate headquarters, Dominic Thornton was clearly still running his empire. Some things didn't change, but as he caught sight of her, other things did change, immediately and visibly. He ended his call mid-sentence, set down his phone, and stood, his attention completely redirected. The CEO vanished, replaced by the man who had knelt before her in the gazebo the previous day. Emily. Her name on his lips held a warmth she'd missed more than she'd allowed herself to acknowledge. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "Neither was I," she admitted, joining him at the railing overlooking the water. "But we need to talk. Really talk. About what happens next." Dominic nodded, closing his laptop without a second glance. "Whatever you want to discuss. I'm listening." The simple statement, "I'm listening," from a man who typically dominated every conversation struck Emily as significant. Perhaps he had changed or was trying to. "If I came back to Chicago with you," she began carefully, "what would that look like? Practically speaking." Hope flashed across his face before he controlled his expression. "However you want it to look. You could have your own place if you prefer independence. Or," he hesitated, then continued with uncharacteristic uncertainty, "you could stay with me, not as an obligation or arrangement, but because I want you there. Because I've missed you every day for 6 months. And the baby?" Emily pressed. "How does Jack fit into your vision?" "Jack." Dominic repeated the name, a smile touching his lips. "You're naming him after your father." "Yes. It's a good name." Dominic's gaze was steady, sincere. "As for how he fits into my vision, he is my vision, Emily. He and you. I know that sounds like a line, like something I'd say to close a deal, but it's the truth. These months without you have shown me what matters, what I can't live without." "Your company has always been your priority," Emily reminded him. 18-hour days, international travel, constant crisis management. That doesn't leave much room for 3 a.m. feedings and pediatrician appointments. "Then my priorities will change," Dominic said simply. "The company can run without my constant presence. I've built a strong executive team. I've just been too controlling to fully utilize them." He stepped closer, not quite touching her but near enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "I'm not claiming I'll transform overnight into the perfect father or partner, but I'm willing to learn, to adapt, to become the man you both need." The sincerity in his voice was compelling, but Emily had spent too many years watching Dominic Thornton in action to accept words alone, no matter how heartfelt. "I need more than promises," she said quietly. "I need to see that you can actually make these changes. That when reality sets in, the sleepless nights, the messy complications of having a newborn, you won't retreat back to the safety of your corporate world." Dominic was silent for a moment, considering her words. Then, "Come back with me," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Not permanently, not yet, just until the baby comes. Let me show you that I can be more than the man you left behind. If I fail, if I can't be what you and Jack need, you can return to Oscoda, and I won't contest your decision." The proposal hung between them, unexpected and strangely reasonable. A trial period. A chance for Dominic to prove himself without Emily having to fully commit to a future she wasn't certain of. "And if I do come back temporarily," she asked, "what about my job? My position has surely been filled by now." "It has," Dominic acknowledged, "but that's not what I'm asking. I'm not offering you your old life back, Emily. I'm asking for the chance to build a new one with you. One where we're equals, partners in every sense." Emily studied his face, searching for any sign of the calculation or manipulation she'd seen him employ in countless business situations. Instead, she found only openness, vulnerability, and a hope so raw it was almost painful to witness. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "To talk to Aunt Clara. This isn't just about me anymore." "Of course." Dominic nodded, respecting her need for space. "I'll be here when you decide, however long it takes." As Emily walked back to Huron Haven, the autumn leaves crunching beneath her feet, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Possibility. Not certainty, not yet, but the opening of a door she'd believed permanently closed. That evening, after another heart-to-heart with Aunt Clara and a long, reflective walk along the lakeshore, Emily made her decision. The next morning, she found Dominic at the same spot on the inn's deck, this time without his laptop or phone in sight, as if he'd been waiting for her. "I'll come back to Chicago with you," she said without preamble, "until the baby is born, to see if what you're offering is real, if we can build something that works for all of us." The joy that transformed Dominic's usually guarded features was almost painful to witness. So genuine, so unrestrained, so unlike the controlled CEO she'd known for years. "You won't regret this," he promised, reaching for her hands but stopping short, still uncertain of his welcome. "When do you want to leave?" "Tomorrow," Emily decided. "I need today to say goodbye to Aunt Clara and pack what I'll need." Dominic nodded, finally allowing himself to take her hands in his. The contact sent a familiar warmth through her, a connection she'd missed more than she'd admitted to herself. "Tomorrow, then," he agreed. "We'll drive back together." If you believe people can truly change when love is powerful enough, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison for more stories that remind us of love's transformative power. The following morning dawned clear and crisp, the kind of perfect fall day that showcased northern Michigan at its most beautiful. Aunt Clara hugged Emily fiercely on the porch of Huron Haven, then surprised Dominic by embracing him as well. "Take care of them both," she instructed, her tone leaving no room for argument. "And bring them back to visit. This is part of Jack's heritage too." "I will," Dominic promised, and Emily believed him. The drive back to Chicago took them south along Lake Michigan's scenic coastline, the vast blue expanse of water accompanying them like a constant companion. In the comfortable interior of Dominic's Range Rover, with miles of highway stretching before them, they began the process of truly talking about the past, about what had gone wrong, about their fears and hopes for the future. "I should have told you how I felt years ago," Dominic admitted as they crossed from Michigan into Indiana, the skyline of Chicago visible in the distance. "I kept thinking there would be a perfect moment, that I needed to have everything in place first. And I should have been brave enough to ask for what I needed," Emily replied, "instead of assuming you couldn't or wouldn't give it." By the time they reached the gleaming glass tower in downtown Chicago where Dominic's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors, something had shifted between them, a tentative bridge being rebuilt across the chasm of misunderstanding and separation. The penthouse itself took Emily's breath away. She'd never been to Dominic's home during their time together in Chicago. Their relationship had existed in hotel suites, in his office after hours, in carefully controlled environments that maintained the separation between his personal and professional lives. Now, stepping into the vast open-concept living area with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, Emily glimpsed a side of Dominic she'd never fully seen. The space was surprisingly warm despite its modern architecture. Comfortable leather sofas, bookshelves filled with well-read volumes, even framed photographs on side tables. "It's not what I expected," she admitted, running her hand along a bookshelf. "It feels like a home, not just a showcase." "What did you expect?" Dominic asked, setting down her suitcase. "Chrome and glass. Minimalist furniture that looks impressive but feels uncomfortable. A place designed to impress visitors rather than welcome them." A shadow crossed his face. "That was my first penthouse. The one I bought when Thornton Enterprises went public. All steel and leather and ego." He gestured around them. "I moved here 3 years ago. Wanted something that felt more like..." "Like what?" Emily prompted when he hesitated. "Like somewhere a family could live," he finished quietly. "Even though I told myself, told everyone, that wasn't what I wanted." The admission hung between them, revealing layers of Dominic Thornton, that Emily had only glimpsed in their years together. "The guest room is through here," he said, leading her down a hallway. "Or there's the master suite if you'd prefer. I can take the guest room." "The guest room is fine for me," Emily assured him, touched by his consideration. Dominic opened the door to reveal a spacious bedroom with its own sitting area and bathroom, decorated in soothing blues and creams. "I'll let you get settled. There's a housekeeper who comes 3 times a week, but otherwise we'll have privacy. My assistant has stocked the kitchen with everything the pregnancy websites recommended for your 3rd trimester. But if you need anything else, just let me know." Emily blinked, surprised by his thoroughness. "You've been researching pregnancy nutrition?" A faint flush colored his cheeks. "I've been researching everything. Pregnancy, childbirth, infant development, parenting philosophies. I have a lot of catching up to do." The image of Dominic Thornton, tech billionaire and corporate shark, poring over pregnancy websites and parenting books was so unexpected that Emily couldn't suppress a smile. "Thank you for trying. I meant what I said in Oscoda, Emily. I want to be the man you both deserve." His blue eyes held hers, earnest in a way she'd rarely seen. "I just need you to show me how." The weeks that followed established a new rhythm between them, tentative at first, then increasingly comfortable. Dominic surprised Emily by actually implementing the changes he'd promised. He delegated more responsibility to his executive team, limited his travel to day trips when possible, and established firm boundaries around his working hours. Most shocking of all, he began cooking. "I didn't know you could cook," Emily said the first time she entered the kitchen to find him preparing grilled salmon and roasted vegetables, sleeves rolled up, tie discarded. "I couldn't," he admitted, carefully turning the fish. "But apparently there are these things called cooking classes and YouTube tutorials. Turns out running a company isn't so different from following a recipe. Attention to detail, proper timing, quality ingredients." Emily leaned against the counter, watching this new version of Dominic with fascination. And what inspired this particular skill development? His eyes met hers over the sizzling pan. "The website said omega-3s are important for the baby's brain development, and that you might be too tired to cook in your 3rd trimester. He shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world for a billionaire CEO to learn to cook for his pregnant. Whatever she was to him now, that was the question that remained unspoken between them. They shared meals, watched movies on the comfortable sectional sofa, took weekend walks along the lakefront when weather permitted. Dominic attended every prenatal appointment, asking thoughtful questions and taking notes. He transformed the second guest bedroom into a nursery, consulting Emily on every decision from the crib selection to the color of the walls. But they maintained separate bedrooms, separate spaces. The physical intimacy that had characterized their brief relationship before Emily's departure remained on hold, replaced by a different kind of intimacy. One built on conversation, on shared anticipation of their son's arrival, on the gradual rebuilding of trust. At night, lying in her comfortable guest room bed, Emily often found herself wondering what Dominic was thinking in his room down the hall. Whether he too lay awake remembering the passion they'd once shared. Whether he regretted the boundaries she'd established upon her return to Chicago. But he never pushed, never pressured. He seemed content to follow her lead, to prove through consistent action rather than words that his transformation was genuine. "You've changed him," observed Vanessa Chen, Thornton Enterprises' chief financial officer, when Emily accompanied Dominic to a company holiday party in December. At 8 months pregnant, Emily had been reluctant to attend, but Dominic had wanted to introduce her to his executive team, not as his former assistant, but as the mother of his child and the woman in his life. "I'm not sure anyone can really change Dominic Thornton," Emily replied, watching as he chatted with board members across the elegantly decorated rooftop venue, his hand occasionally checking his phone where they'd installed a contraction timing app, just in case. Vanessa laughed. 6 months ago, he would have been working the room like a politician, mentally ranking every conversation by its potential value to the company. Tonight, he's checked his watch 4 times in 20 minutes, and I'm pretty sure he's calculating the fastest route to the hospital from here. Emily smiled, following Vanessa's gaze to where Dominic was now clearly wrapping up his conversation. his body language signaling his intention to return to her side. "He's trying," she acknowledged. "More than trying," Vanessa said. "In the decade I've known him, I've never seen him delegate authority the way he has these past months. He's actually taking weekends off. The man who once told me sleep was for the mediocre is leaving the office by 6 most nights." She gave Emily a measured look. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. It's not just good for him, it's good for the company." Turns out Dominic Thornton with work-life balance is even more effective than Dominic Thornton the workaholic. Before Emily could respond, Dominic rejoined them, his hand coming to rest protectively at the small of her back. "Everything okay?" he asked, his eyes scanning her face for any sign of discomfort. "Perfect," Emily assured him, and was surprised to realize she meant it. The peaceful rhythm they'd established was shattered 2 weeks before Emily's due date, when she woke in the middle of the night to sharp, insistent pain. For a moment, she lay still in the darkness, trying to determine if this was just another false alarm. She did several in recent weeks, Braxton Hicks contractions that had sent Dominic into a carefully controlled panic each time. But this was different, more intense, more purposeful. Emily reached for her phone, checking the time, 2:17 a.m. She hesitated, not wanting to wake Dominic unnecessarily, but another contraction gripped her before she could decide, this one strong enough to make her gasp. She didn't need to call out. Somehow, Dominic was already there, appearing in her doorway as if he'd sensed her distress. "Emily?" His voice was alert despite the hour, no trace of sleep in his tone. "Is it time?" She nodded, unable to speak as the contraction peaked. Dominic was beside her instantly, his hand finding hers, his eyes never leaving her face as he breathed with her through the pain. When it subsided, he helped her sit up, his movements calm and assured. "I'll get your hospital bag. The car is already packed with the car seat and everything else on the list. Can you walk, or should I carry you?" "I can walk," Emily assured him, touched by his preparedness. "But it's probably too early to go to the hospital. First babies usually take their time." Dominic nodded, though she could see the tension in his jaw. "Then we'll time the contractions here until they're close enough. I've downloaded 3 different timing apps, just in case." Despite her discomfort, Emily smiled. "Of course you have." The next few hours passed in a blur of increasing pain and decreasing intervals between contractions. Dominic remained steadfast beside her, timing each wave meticulously, offering water, applying counterpressure to her lower back, never once checking his phone for work messages or showing impatience with the process. By dawn, the contractions were coming 5 minutes apart, and Emily's resolve to labor at home was wavering. "I think it's time," she admitted as another contraction released its grip. Dominic didn't need to be told twice. Within minutes, he had her settled in the Range Rover, the heat adjusted to her preference, a pillow position to support her back. As they pulled out of the underground garage, fat snowflakes began falling from the dark January sky. "Perfect timing," Emily murmured, watching the snow swirl in the headlights. A Chicago blizzard for Jack's arrival. Dominic's hand found hers across the console. "He's already taking after me," maximizing the drama of his entrance. The joke, so unlike Dominic's usual serious demeanor, startled a laugh from Emily, which quickly transformed into a groan as another contraction built. Dominic's grip tightened, solid and reassuring until the pain receded. The normally 20-minute drive to Chicago Memorial took nearly 40 in the worsening storm, but Dominic navigated the slippery streets with the same focused precision he brought to everything. At the hospital entrance, he ignored the valet, parking illegally near the doors and daring anyone to challenge him as he helped Emily inside. The labor progressed faster than anyone expected for a first-time mother. By mid-morning, Emily was fully dilated, her body working with relentless intensity to bring their son into the world. Through it all, Dominic never left her side, his usual commanding presence channeled into fierce advocacy when a shift change brought a nurse who seemed dismissive of Emily's birth preferences. She said no internal monitoring unless medically necessary, he'd stated, his tone brooking no argument. If you can't respect that, we'll need a different nurse. Emily, in the grip of transition, had been too focused on her body's work to fully register the exchange, but she'd felt Dominic's unwavering support like a physical force, grounding her through the most challenging moments. When the time came to push, Dominic positioned himself behind her on the birthing bed, supporting her weight, murmuring encouragement with each effort. "You're the strongest person I've ever known," he told her, his voice thick with emotion. "You can do this, Emily. You're already doing it." At 11:47 a.m., as the January blizzard raged outside, Jack Alexander Thornton entered the world with a powerful cry, his tiny fists clenched as if ready to take on life's challenges from his very first breath. "He's perfect," Dominic whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as the doctor placed their son on Emily's chest. "You're both perfect." In that moment, watching Dominic gaze at their son with wonder and fierce love, Emily knew with absolute certainty that his transformation was real. This wasn't the calculated response of a man fulfilling an obligation or playing a role. This was raw, genuine emotion from someone experiencing the most profound connection of his life. The hours that followed cemented this certainty. Dominic handled their newborn with surprising confidence, changing the first diaper without hesitation, swaddling Jack with techniques he'd clearly practiced in advance, holding him against his chest with a natural ease that belied his previous inexperience with children. When the nurses suggested Dominic might want to go home to rest while Emily and Jack slept, he politely but firmly declined. "My place is here," he said simply, settling into the uncomfortable recliner beside Emily's hospital bed. "With my family." The word family, spoken without qualification or hesitation, brought fresh tears to Emily's eyes. For so long, she'd feared becoming an obligation to this man. Now, watching him cradle their son with such tenderness, she realized how profoundly she'd underestimated his capacity for love and commitment when given the chance to embrace them. They brought Jack home 3 days later to a penthouse transformed by Dominic's meticulous preparation. The nursery was fully stocked with everything they could possibly need, but Dominic had also set up a bassinet in the master bedroom. Their bedroom now, as Emily had quietly moved her things there the morning they left for the hospital, a decision that felt as natural as breathing. The early weeks of parenthood tested them both in ways neither could have anticipated. Jack was a healthy but demanding newborn, with strong opinions about sleep, against it, and feeding schedules, irrelevant to his needs. Night blended into day in an exhausting cycle of feedings, diaper changes, and brief moments of rest. Through it all, Dominic remained steadfast. He took paternity leave, shocking the business world and delighting his executive team, who saw it as further evidence of his evolving leadership style. He handled night feedings with formula so Emily could get stretches of sleep between nursing sessions. He fielded calls from board members while wearing Jack in a carrier, the powerful CEO bouncing gently to soothe his son even as he discussed quarterly projections. "You don't have to do all this," Emily told him one evening, finding him in the nursery gently rocking a fussy Jack while reviewing contracts on his tablet. "You could have an assistant handle some of it. Or a night nurse." Dominic looked up, his expression serious. "I don't want to miss a moment. Not after everything I almost lost." He glanced down at their son, now quieting against his chest. "Besides, I'm discovering I'm quite good at multitasking when properly motivated." As winter melted into spring, they established a new normal. Dominic returned to the office but maintained reasonable hours, often working from home in the afternoons so he could spend time with Jack. Emily began consulting remotely for select clients, using her marketing expertise while maintaining the flexibility to prioritize their son. They didn't discuss the temporary nature of their arrangement. Emily's agreement to stay until the baby came had long since expired, but neither mentioned Oscoda or the possibility of her return. Instead, they moved forward day by day, building a life together that neither had imagined possible 6 months earlier. On a perfect May evening, with Jack peacefully asleep after his bath, Dominic suggested they have dinner on the penthouse terrace. Emily agreed, grateful for the chance to enjoy the mild spring air and the spectacular view of the city lighting up as dusk fell. She emerged from the bedroom to find the terrace transformed. Twinkling lights had been strung overhead, creating a canopy of stars. A small table was set with fine china and crystal, a bottle of champagne chilling beside it. In the center, a simple arrangement of white peonies, her favorite flowers, though she couldn't remember ever telling Dominic that. "What's all this?" she asked, stepping onto the terrace where Dominic waited, more formally dressed than usual in a charcoal suit she recognized from their early days together. "I wanted tonight to be special," he said, taking her hand and leading her to the table. "It's been exactly 1 year since the Thornton Foundation Gala." Emily's breath caught. She hadn't realized the significance of the date, had been too consumed with Jack's needs and their daily routine to track such anniversaries. But Dominic had remembered, just as he'd remembered her casual mention of Aunt Clara's blueberry pancakes, just as he apparently remembered her preference for peonies. "A year," she echoed softly. "So much has changed." "Everything has changed," Dominic agreed, his blue eyes intense in the soft lighting. "Everything except how I feel about you. That's only grown stronger." He served dinner, prepared by a private chef, Emily suspected, given its sophistication compared to Dominic's developing culinary skills. They talked easily as they ate, sharing stories of their day, discussing Jack's latest developments, enjoying the simple pleasure of adult conversation without a baby monitor between them, though Emily noticed Dominic had positioned his phone to display the nursery camera feed, just in case. As they finished dessert, a perfect chocolate souffle that reminded Emily of their first night together, Dominic reached across the table for her hand. "I had a whole speech prepared," he said, his voice uncharacteristically nervous, "about how you changed my life, about how Jack completed something I didn't even know was missing, about how these past months have been the happiest I've ever known, despite the sleepless nights and the challenges." Emily's heart began to race as Dominic stood, still holding her hand, and then, in a gesture she'd never imagined from this proud, powerful man, knelt beside her chair. "But I think what matters most is the simplest truth," he continued, reaching into his pocket to withdraw a small velvet box. "I love you, Emily. I want to spend my life with you and Jack. I want more children if you do. I want Sunday mornings with Aunt Clara's pancakes and winter evenings by the fire and everything in between." He opened the box to reveal a ring that took Emily's breath away, not for its obvious value, though the oval diamond was certainly spectacular, but for its vintage setting that somehow perfectly captured her aesthetic preferences. "It was my grandmother's," Dominic explained, following her gaze. "The only woman I've ever known who was as strong and compassionate as you are." Tears filled Emily's eyes as Dominic took the ring from its box, holding it poised at the tip of her finger. "Emily Catherine Harper, will you marry me? Not because of Jack, though he's the greatest gift you could have given me. Not because it's expected or convenient, but because I can't imagine my life without you at the center of it." For a moment, Emily was transported back to that morning in her Lincoln Park apartment, staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test, imagining Dominic seeing their child as an unwelcome complication or accepting out of duty rather than love. How wrong she had been. How close she had come to missing this. The genuine transformation of a man who had discovered what truly mattered only when faced with its loss. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "Yes, Dominic, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to pull her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the emotion words couldn't capture. When they finally parted, Emily rested her forehead against his, overwhelmed by the journey that had brought them to this moment. "I need to tell you something," she said softly. "Something I should have said months ago, in that gazebo by Lake Huron." Dominic waited, his arms still around her, his expression open and vulnerable in a way that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. "I love you," Emily said simply. "I've loved you for years. Through all of it, the fear, the running away, the uncertainty, that never changed." His smile was radiant in the twinkling lights. "Then we've wasted enough time already. Let's not waste any more." As if on cue, Jack's cry came through the monitor, right on schedule for his evening feeding. They both laughed, the perfect romantic moment interrupted by the very real demands of parenthood. "I'll get him," Dominic said, pressing one more kiss to Emily's lips. "Take your time. Enjoy the view." Emily watched him go, then turned to look out over the Chicago skyline, the city lights reflecting in Lake Michigan beyond. A year ago, she had fled this view, this life, this man, certain she was protecting herself and her unborn child from heartbreak and disappointment. Now, with Dominic's grandmother's ring catching the light on her finger and their son's cries quieting as his father comforted him, Emily understood that sometimes the greatest risk was not in staying, but in running away from the possibility of love. This story reminds us that true strength isn't found in walls we build, but in the courage to be vulnerable. Tag a friend who needs this reminder, and join our community of women who believe in second chances and the power of authentic love. 1 year later, on a perfect June afternoon, Emily stood in the garden of Huron Haven Bed and Breakfast, surrounded by wildflowers and the gentle sound of Lake Huron lapping at the shore. Aunt Clara had insisted they hold the wedding here, where your journey together truly began, she'd said, and neither Emily nor Dominic had wanted to argue. In the end, they'd compromised. A small, intimate ceremony in Oscoda, followed by a lavish reception in Chicago for Dominic's business associates and the wider social circle they now shared. The best of both worlds, just as their life together had become. Emily smoothed the silk of her simple but elegant gown, designed to complement rather than compete with the natural beauty of the lakeside setting. Through the window of the upstairs bedroom where she was preparing, she could see guests gathering on the lawn, Dominic's executive team mingling with Oscoda locals, Chicago friends chatting with Emily's family members who had traveled from across the country. And at the center of it all, looking impossibly handsome in his tailored suit, was Dominic, their now 1-year-old son Jack perched on his hip. The sight of them together, dark heads bent in conversation, Jack's tiny hand patting his father's cheek, filled Emily's heart to overflowing. A soft knock at the door announced Aunt Clara, resplendent in a silver-blue dress that matched her eyes. "It's time, Emmy," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your groom is getting impatient." Emily laughed. "Some things never change. Dominic Thornton still hates to wait." "Some things do change, though," Clara observed, helping Emily with the final adjustments to her veil. "That man down there is not the same one who showed up in my driveway in a fancy car looking for you. He's better, happier, more human." "We both are," Emily acknowledged, taking her aunt's arm as they moved toward the stairs. "I never thought I could have this career, family, love. I always believed I'd have to sacrifice one for the others." "The best things in life don't require sacrifice," Clara said wisely. "They require integration and courage. You had both, even when you didn't realize it." The ceremony itself was everything Emily had dreamed but never dared hope for. Standing before their closest loved ones, with Jack toddling between them, supervised closely by Vanessa Chun, who had become a dear friend and Jack's honorary aunt, Emily and Dominic exchanged vows they had written themselves. "I promise to remember that the strongest partnerships are built on honesty, even when the truth is difficult," Dominic said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "I promise to value your independence as much as your presence in my life. I promise to be the father our children deserve and the husband you deserve, present, engaged, and grateful for every moment we share." Emily's vows, spoken through happy tears, echoed his commitment to communication and partnership. "I promise to trust in your love, even when fear whispers doubts. I promise to see you for who you are, not who I fear you might be. I promise to build our family on a foundation of honesty, respect, and the certainty that together, we are stronger than we could ever be apart." As they sealed their promises with a kiss, cheers erupted from their assembled guests. Jack clapped his hands in delight, his father's blue eyes bright with joy in his mother's delicate features. The reception that followed was a perfect blend of elegance and warmth. Fine champagne served alongside Aunt Clara's famous blueberry tarts, classical music giving way to joyful dancing as the evening progressed. Emily and Dominic moved through it all in a bubble of happiness, never straying far from each other's side. "Happy?" Dominic asked as they swayed together for their first dance. his arms holding her close against the cooling evening air. "Beyond words," Emily replied, resting her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her cheek. "Though I still can't believe you convinced the Chicago Symphony Orchestra's string quartet to play at a bed and breakfast in northern Michigan." Dominic's laugh rumbled through his chest. "Some negotiations are worth whatever it takes." His hand traced gentle patterns on her back as they moved to the music. "Besides, nothing is too good for the woman who gave me everything I never knew I needed." As the evening deepened into night, stars appearing above the lake in a display no city skyline could match, Emily found herself standing on the same porch where Dominic had found her a year and a half earlier. She watched their guests enjoying the celebration. Jack now sound asleep in Aunt Clara's arms, Dominic deep in conversation with Emily's cousins from Seattle, their Chicago and Oscoda worlds blending seamlessly into something new and beautiful. "Penny for your thoughts," came a voice beside her. Vanessa Chun, elegant in emerald silk, offered Emily a glass of sparkling water. "Just marveling at how life can change so completely," Emily admitted, accepting the drink. "If you told me 2 years ago that I'd be standing here as Dominic Thornton's wife, with our son sleeping inside and another baby on the way, I would have said you were delusional." Vanessa's eyes widened. "Another baby? Already? Does Dominic know?" Emily smiled, her hand drifting unconsciously to her still flat stomach. "Not yet. I just confirmed it yesterday. I'm planning to tell him tonight, after everyone leaves." "He'll be ecstatic," Vanessa predicted. "The board might have a collective heart attack, though. 2 Thornton paternity leaves in under 2 years? Unprecedented." They both laughed, knowing the company had not just survived but thrived under the more balanced leadership approach Dominic had adopted since Jack's birth. The feared disruption of his reduced hours and delegated authority had instead led to innovation and growth as other executives stepped up to fill the space he'd created. "Thank you," Emily said suddenly, turning to face the CFO directly, "for supporting him through all these changes, for being a friend to both of us." Vanessa's expression softened. "He's a better CEO now, more human, more connected to what matters beyond the bottom line. And you?" She squeezed Emily's hand. "You found your voice. The woman who used to anticipate his needs before he knew them now makes sure her own needs are equally valued. It's been remarkable to watch you both grow." Before Emily could respond, Dominic appeared at her side, his arms sliding naturally around her waist. "Are you two plotting corporate takeovers on my wedding day?" he asked, pressing a kiss to Emily's temple. "Always," Vanessa replied with a grin. "But I'll leave you two alone. I think your bride might have something to tell you." With a meaningful glance at Emily, she slipped away to rejoin the party. Dominic raised an eyebrow. "Something to tell me?" Emily took his hand, leading him away from the porch, down the familiar path to the lakeside gazebo where they'd had their first real conversation after months apart. The white structure was illuminated with soft lights for the wedding, creating a magical glow against the darkness of the lake beyond. Inside, Emily turned to face her husband, the words still new and wonderful in her mind. "Do you remember what happened here? The last time we stood in this gazebo?" Dominic's expression grew serious, his hands finding hers. "I knelt before you and felt our son move for the first time. I told you I loved you. I asked for a chance to prove I could be the man you both deserved. And you have been," Emily said softly. "Every day since then, you've shown me through actions, not just words, that your love is real, that your commitment to our family comes first." "It always will," he promised, drawing her closer. Emily took a deep breath, joy bubbling up inside her. "Our family is growing, Dominic. Jack is going to be a big brother in about 7 months." For a moment, Dominic simply stared at her, processing her words. Then his face transformed with such pure, unguarded happiness that Emily felt tears spring to her eyes. "A baby?" he whispered, his hands moving to cradle her face. "We're having another baby?" Emily nodded, laughing through her tears as Dominic lifted her off her feet in a gentle but exuberant embrace, spinning her in a circle before carefully setting her down again. "When did you find out? How are you feeling?" Is everything okay? The questions tumbled out, his protective instincts immediately engaged. Yesterday, tired but good. And yes, everything looks perfect, Emily answered, touched by his immediate concern for her well-being. I wanted to wait until today to tell you. A wedding gift that couldn't be wrapped. Dominic knelt before her, just as he had 18 months earlier, his hands resting reverently on her stomach. Hello, little one, he said softly. Your mom and dad already love you so much. Your big brother is going to be so excited to meet you. The tenderness in his voice, the complete absence of hesitation or concern about how another child might complicate their lives or his work, confirmed yet again how profoundly Dominic had changed, or perhaps, how he had finally allowed his true self to emerge from behind the walls of ambition and control he'd built over the years. Boy or girl, it doesn't matter, he said, rising to take Emily in his arms again. Though I have to admit, a daughter with your eyes and spirit would be a beautiful addition to our family. Poor Jack might feel outnumbered, Emily teased, leaning into his embrace. He'll have me to teach him how to handle strong, brilliant women, Dominic replied with a smile. Though I'm still learning that particular skill myself. They stood together in the gazebo, the sounds of their wedding celebration drifting down from the main house, the future stretching before them filled with possibilities neither had dared imagine when they'd stood in this same spot, wounded and uncertain, a year and a half earlier. We should get back to our guests, Emily said eventually, though she made no move to leave the circle of Dominic's arms. In a minute, he murmured, his lips finding hers in a kiss that held all the promise of their vows, all the joy of their news, all the love that had grown between them through challenge and change. I just want to remember this moment. You, me, our son, our new baby. Everything that matters most in the world, right here. Emily understood exactly what he meant. For all the wealth and power Dominic Thornton commanded, for all the success she had found in her own career, nothing compared to the richness of the life they were building together. A life founded on truth, strengthened by challenge, and sustained by love that had proven itself not just in words, but in the hardest and most beautiful moments of their journey. 7 months later, on a snowy January night that echoed Jack's dramatic arrival, Charlotte Clara Thornton made her entrance into the world. A tiny, perfect daughter with her father's determination and her mother's gentle spirit. As Dominic cradled her in his arms, Jack peering curiously at his new sister from Emily's hospital bed, the circle of their family felt complete in a way that transcended any success either of them had known before. In the years that followed, Emily and Dominic built a life that balanced their Chicago home with regular visits to Huron Haven. Jack and Charlotte grew up knowing both worlds, the excitement and opportunity of the city, and the peace and connection of the lakeside community that had brought their parents back together. Dominic continued to lead Thornton Enterprises, but with a wisdom and perspective that made him an even more effective leader. Emily established her own marketing consultancy, specializing in helping women-owned businesses grow and thrive. Together, they created a foundation focused on supporting single parents pursuing education and career advancement. A legacy beyond business, inspired by their own journey. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they returned to the gazebo at Huron Haven, this time with Jack and Charlotte racing ahead of them down the familiar path, their laughter carrying across the summer evening. Do you ever think about what might have happened if I hadn't found you? Dominic asked as they watched their children explore the lakeshore, Charlotte's dark curls bouncing as she followed her brother's lead. Emily considered the question, her hand finding his as naturally as breathing. Sometimes. But then I look at our life, at our children, at who we've become together, and I realize we would have found our way to each other eventually. How can you be so sure? Dominic's voice held genuine curiosity. Emily smiled, remembering the frightened woman who had fled Chicago to protect her heart and her unborn child. Remembering the controlled, isolated man who had built an empire but nearly missed building a life. Because some loves are meant to be, even when we try to run from them, she said simply. And because the greatest journeys often begin with the bravest choices, even when those choices lead us right back to where we were always meant to be. Dominic's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her close as they watched the sunset paint Lake Huron in shades of gold and pink. the same view that had comforted Emily during her months of uncertainty, the same beauty that now framed their family's happiest moments. "I spent a lifetime building walls," he murmured against her hair. "You and our children tore them down and gave me something worth more than any fortune." Emily turned in his arms, rising on tiptoe to kiss him softly. "We found our forever," she whispered against his lips. And as their children's laughter mingled with the gentle lapping of waves against the shore, Emily knew it was true. Their story hadn't been easy or straightforward. It had required courage, forgiveness, and the willingness to be vulnerable when every instinct screamed for self-protection. But those very challenges had created something precious and unbreakable. A love tested by fear and strengthened by truth. A family built on choice rather than obligation. A forever that meant more because they had almost lost it before it began. In the end, Emily realized that was the greatest gift of all. Not the certainty that everything would be perfect, but the knowledge that whatever came, they would face it together, with the same courage and commitment that had brought them home to each other when all seemed lost. And that, she knew with absolute certainty, was a legacy worth more than any empire. A love story worth every moment of the journey that had led them here.